Welcome, everybody, all of our guests, and Rebecca Slitt. Rebecca Slitt is the managing editor for Choice of Games, LLC. They're running a new division called Heart's Choice. She is the editor and partner at Choice of Games, LLC, and the author of the interactive novels Sci-Hi and First Year Demons. She has also contributed to the laptop games Time Watch RPG, Noirlandia, and Geist, I hope I pronounced that right, and is the author of the forthcoming Dark College Years. Aren't all college years dark? Before joining Games of Choice, she was a professor of medieval history, specializing in the aristocratic and military culture of 12th century England. She has presented on game design and interactive fiction at WorldCom, I've been to Arisia, the Villanova University Pop Culture Series, and the International Medieval Congress on Medieval Studies. Welcome to Rebecca.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, thank you. And thank you, Dawn, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone, for showing up, especially those of you on the West Coast. It's very early for you. I am right now in South Hadley, Massachusetts. I'm coming to you from NECRA, New England, RWA, and Rainbow Writers. And I'm here to talk to you about digital romance. You mentioned that some of you play video games or have kids that play video games, and romance games are an increasingly large part of the video game market, but they kind of fly under the radar in a lot of ways. They have a very dedicated audience that doesn't often cross over. Like you won't see the same kinds of people playing romance games that you do playing like Fortnite. So I want to talk to you a little about what the field is like, what's out there, and how these games are constructed, how they balance the narrative beats of a romance with the more game-like elements of a video game. And I'll finish by talking getting to some nitty-gritty craft stuff about how we at Heart's Choice approach these issues. So, time to fire up the PowerPoint. All right. So, welcome to Writing Interactive Digital Romance, and
Yeah, we're not seeing anything here.
Not. All right, sorry. All right, so first, I share my screen. Yes. Oh.
There we are.
And
okay.
Now play. All right, now are you seeing it?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. So there we go. Choosing your happily ever after, writing digital romance. Again, recap about myself and where I'm coming from in this. I've been an editor at Choice of Games for almost 7 years now. And actually, my bio has updated since I submitted it. The second in the Sci-Hi series has come out, and so my home is paranormal romance, specifically YA. My current work in progress is for Heart's Choice, called Love's Super. It is a superhero romance in the spirit of the CW superhero shows like The Flash and Supergirl. So I've been with Choice of Games for almost 7 years, and one of the major things that I've done as an editor and partner at Choice of Games is to start launching our romance label, Heart's Choice. And that launched in December 2019, so we're fairly new, but about 12 years have passed since December 2019, so we've been around for a while. So what I'm going to talk about today, what is digital romance, digital interactive romance, what are the major categories, what's out there, what's different about Heart's Choice, how that fits into the field, how we write interactive narratives, some of the ways that we approach writing a story where you don't necessarily know what's going to happen next, how we manage that kind of continuity and branching and story and character. How we apply those things specifically to interactive romance, what are the specific considerations that you need when you're writing an interactive romance as opposed to an interactive sci-fi novel or an interactive sports story. And finally, how you can do it too. What tools are out there, what you need to think about if you want to get into writing this specific kind of romance. So I'm going to start from pretty basic principles. Some of these terms and concepts may be familiar to some of you, but in case they're not, this talk would be really confusing. So I'm going to define all my terms up front to be extra sure. So digital interactive romance is a relatively new field that covers a widest range of video games that have a narrative storyline that generally proceeds in a progressive manner from beginning to end, that has a central love story and a certain degree of branching narrative. Now, branching narrative is a story that can proceed along several different potential paths. And which path it goes along depends on the reader's decision at key choice points. Some branching narratives can be relatively simple, as the one in the top corner where there are only a few little circles there. Some branching narratives can proceed pretty much in a line until the end, where there's a single really, really important choice that determines which of several endings you get. Other branching narratives can be very complex. You make one choice and then another, and each of those choices sends the story off into a different direction. So there can be many, many different ways to proceed through the story, and many different versions of the same story. Heart's Choice games are in this second category. And I'll talk more later about how that complexity affects our stories. And the visualization of our games is the one in the bottom right corner that's sort of an hourglass. And I'll talk a lot more about how we manage that narrative structure later on. Two other key terms that I'm going to be referring to a lot. PC stands for player character. That is the main character in a digital romance game. That's the character who is the POV character for the story. Digital romance games, most of them have only one PC. There's only one POV character, unlike a regular romance novel where you're shifting back and forth between perspectives in the couple. In a digital romance novel, you are generally only taking on one character and seeing the story from their perspective. RO means romance option, and that's sort of an internal shorthand that we use at Heart's Choice and Choice of Games. I don't think other companies use it, but in case I slipped up and said it, I wanted to make sure you all would know what I was talking about. So RO is romance option. And in games where there are multiple potential lovers, we use that to refer to them. So there are a few broad categories of interactive romance. And some of them are closer and some of them are farther away from regular non-interactive romance novels. But they are an increasingly large part of the conversation in the romance genre because they are hugely popular. So the first one is visual novels. And this is one of the first genres of digital interactive romance. They got their start in Japan. They come in a lot of genres, but romance and erotica are among the most popular. And this is what they look like. Relatively simple image. You can see the sort of Japanese animation, anime style in the art. And you know, the text is generally comes in short chunks, dialogue, brief narration. There is a wide range of degrees of branching among visual novels. Some of them have pretty much no branching at all. They're essentially a multimedia novel where the only action that you as the player take is to click next to turn the page. Others are extremely complicated, have lots and lots and lots of choices, and hundreds of thousands of words of potential text that the player can see. But you only see a small portion of that because you're taking one of many, many potential paths. And there are lots and lots of visual novels out there. This is a screenshot from Doki Doki Literature Club, which is one of the most popular. In visual novels, there are a lot of potential different gender combinations. So next up, dating sim. That's short for dating simulation. This is a subset of visual novels, although not all of them overlap with visual novel. So in a dating sim, the PC has many potential lovers to choose from. And again, the gender combinations can vary. Sometimes the PC is a man with potential women lovers. Sometimes the PC is a woman with potential male lovers. This particular screenshot is from a super popular recent gay male dating sim called Dream Daddy. The person in the screenshot here is the PC's daughter. So what's notable about dating sims is their game design. And here's where I'm going to start getting into like the nitty gritty of the game part of an interactive romance. So dating sims are sort of transactional and gamified. You have many potential lovers, like 10 or more. And the way you build up a relationship is in a transactional sort of way. In many games, is actually tracked by something called a love meter. And you build up your love meter with each character, like keeping score in a video game, by spending time with them, giving them gifts, doing nice things for them, etc. And you have to manage your time pretty carefully because you have reasons to want to spend time with some of them or even all of them. You have competing goals. You want to spend time with a person, but as in this screenshot, you and your daughter have just moved. You need to unpack. You really need coffee. Or you could go to the dog park where you could meet somebody special. So there are competing incentives. And that's where the game aspect comes in. You choose what your character's priorities are, and you choose what your relationship priorities are. As in this diagram here, the biggest branches of the narrative come at the end. A choice like the one you see here will make a small difference to the narrative in the short run. But for the most part, the game proceeds in a pretty linear fashion from beginning to end. You generally get the same scenes in the same order with minor branches to spend time with one character or another. The major branch happens at the end. And in a dating sim, the game makes the major decision for you. The game measures your love meter. And if you have gotten it high enough with a particular character, then you end up with them. If you have not gotten your love meter up high enough with any of the characters, then you end up with nobody. You do not get your happily ever after. And that's what makes dating sims different from some other kinds of interactive romance. You might lose the happily ever after. So that's another big and really popular thing. And it's, right, that's what I was gonna say about that. So the possibility of losing the game incentivizes replay. If you really, really liked this other character and you wanted to get together with them, well, you're gonna keep replaying until you do it right so that you can get together with them. Or you might be really curious about what the other characters are like. So you replay to try to make different choices, to see how you can end up with another character, to see how the story feels if you're aiming for another RO at the end. So those are dating sims. One of the newer kinds of interactive romance, and one of the most popular right now, are the choices, episode, chapters family. And I'm treating these together because they are all fairly similar in their approach to romance. Episode stories tend to have more branching, have the most branching, chapters have the least, but they're all pretty much together. So the Choices episode chapter family of interactive romance are closer to a regular novel in that each one features a single playable character with a fairly well-defined personality and a single love interest, also with a well-defined personality. Sometimes you're choosing among 2 or 3 lovers, but most often only one. Most often, the main character is a woman and the love interest is a man, although again, these come in all gender combinations. What this means is that most often you don't have the gamification of romance that you have in dating sims. In the Choices episode chapters family, it's not about the video game of building up romance. It's about the experience of being inside the story. And to go along with that, most of these are pretty linear. You can make a few choices along the way, but most of them are flavor. They affect the story in the moment, and they let you express your emotions and preferences, but they don't significantly branch the narrative. So in a scene, like, you will always go on a date at this particular point in the story. You don't get to choose whether or not to go on the date. What you do get to choose is what you say on the date, what you wear, how you feel about it. And that brings me to one of the really distinctive features about the Choices episode chapters family, which is the financial side. In all of the other games that I have mentioned before, when you buy the game, you buy the game, you have the whole game. Sometimes there's an expansion, but generally you don't pay anything extra. The way Choices and episode and chapters make their money is by paying for cool stuff. You pay for premium options. So in the example that you have here from episode, you can pay extra for your first choice of outfit. In other games, you can pay extra for going on an extra cool date. So this is how these apps make most of their money, by charging extra for the really cool content. So to sum up what we've talked about so far, these are some general features of interactive romance that each type of digital interactive romance has to some degree or another. They all have branching narrative. Some have complex ones, but usually they're relatively simple. And a lot of that simplicity is due to the fact that all of the games I've mentioned so far have a very strong visual component. And if you're going to have different events in a story, you need to draw those events in the story. And that starts to get into a lot of extra time and effort and money in paying artists. So there is a simple structure. Usually, these games will have either a single prescripted lover or a choice among a large number of lovers, either a lot or only one, very rarely 2 or 3. A lot of them have transactional and gamified romance. You progress toward your goal by making choices that bring you closer to a single person while managing your time and your other obligations. One other sort of side note is about genre. While all of these games have stories in multiple genres, digital romance is more aligned with indie publishing because there are a lot more paranormal than in traditional publishing these days. Like, do not let anyone tell you that sexy vampires and werewolves are over. They are not. They're just living in digital romance and indie. Even if trad publishers have their issues with it. You want your sexy vampires and werewolves, come over to digital. And finally, in all of these games, a lot of the fun comes from immersion. You are the main character. In some chapters and episode games, they invest in custom art for the main character's appearance. You can choose your character's hair color, eye color, skin tone, all of it. You can make the main character look like you. You can feel like you are the one going through the story. And we know a lot of romance novel readers love the feeling of identifying with the main character. Interactive romance takes that identification and brings it even closer by letting you feel that you are in the story. The prose in just about all of these is in the second person. The text is always saying, what do you want to do? And that brings us to Heart's Choice. And there's my water. So Heart's Choice, here is how we are different. First of all, we are text only. And that means several things. First of all, it means that we can have a lot more customization of the main character and everything else. Because we don't have to pay for extra art if we want to have extra options for appearance. We just need to add a few extra words. It means that we can tell much more complex stories. We can give the main character a lot more interiority because we can spend more time discussing their feelings and their thoughts and talking about how and why they want to do things. So you can get a lot more complexity in the story and in the characterization. It also means that we are more accessible. Because we are text only, we are fully accessible to screen readers. So we're accessible to blind people, people with visual impairments. We don't depend on, clicking the right place in the picture. There's no gameplay that depends on visual elements. Other things that make Heart's Choice different, we are gender inclusive. We are LGBT friendly. In our parent company, Choice of Games, is gender inclusive in all its games, and we are very proud of that. Choice of Games, every title lets you choose the PC's gender and orientation. Some Heart's Choice titles allow that too, just as you can swap out appearances with a few extra words of text. You can just use the code to change the gender of a character and add that to the differences in their appearance. We also have some Heart's Choice games with fixed gender characters, a character that is always a man, always a woman, etc. But within that, we have a balance of all gender combinations. Some of our games are MM, some are FF, some are FM, etc. Heart's Choice games are different because all of our games have very complex branching. We have one choice point every few hundred words. Some of those are flavor choices, like the ones we saw in episodes, choosing what you want to say in the moment, choosing what you want to wear, things that express your personality but don't branch the story. But some of them do branch the story. And that's one of the things I'm going to be talking about later on, is how we manage that complexity. And finally, one of the things that really sets us apart. We promise the happily ever after, and we keep that promise. Whereas in a dating sim, you have multiple lovers to choose from, but you might not get any of them. In a Heart's Choice title, you have 2 or 3 lovers to choose from, and whichever one you choose, you are guaranteed to end up with them. And the images that you see are the cover art to some of our games. Bottom we have Pirate's Pleasure, which is one of our more popular titles. In the middle is Jazz Age, which is set in 1920s New York. And the top is A Player's Heart, which is backstage in an opera company. And I'll be showing examples from all of those games and a couple others as we go on. So here are some examples of what a Heart's Choice game looks like. As you can see, it's only text. If you remember the old Choose Your Own Adventure books from back in the 80s, it looks kind of like that on the page. You get a few paragraphs of text, you get several choice points, you click on one of the options, you click next, and that takes you to a different page depending on what you've chosen. Some choices affect the plot, like in the top one. from Jazz Age. In that one, the PC is an aspiring Broadway star in 1920s New York. They are trying to make ends meet by getting a job at a Harlem nightclub. And they are offered a choice of several ways to work in the nightclub. And so the options are, I'll perform. I came to make it big on Broadway, so I might as well practice. Bartending can't be so different from working at the malt shop. I'll give it a try. I'll take my chances on poker, maybe count a few cards to improve my odds. Or, I've got a better idea. Sell tickets on a 50-50 draw and split the profits with Lila. So, depending on which one of these options the player chooses, their first night on the job will go very differently. So that's a plot branching choice. Bottom, we have an example of a choice from another game, and a different kind of choice, which is a personality type choice. This is from Dawnfall, which is a sci-fi game by Roanna Silver. So here, the PC is a member of a spaceship crew, and they are just reuniting with their long-lost sister for the first time in a very long time. And here they have a choice of how they feel about their sister and how they're going to react to her. I've always looked up to my older sister. She only has the best of intentions, but can be a little intense. We respect each other, but she's no fun at all. Or, I cannot stand her. And this doesn't branch the plot. The PC will still have the same conversation with their sister in the next scene. But the flavor of that conversation will vary depending on how they have chosen to feel about her. And so this brings me to the two most important craft aspects of the discussion, how to write interactive narrative and how to write interactive romance in particular. So first, how we deal with interactive narrative. And the first problem that we have is how to manage complexity. And this is something that I've alluded to a few times already. So if you have one scene and there are 3 options for where to go next, and then each of those 3 scenes has 3 options for where to go after that, and then each of those 9 scenes has 3 options for where to go after that, then you have exponents, and soon you have thousands and thousands of options, as you have in the top example here. You go from one potential scene to many, many, many potential scenes very quickly. If you allow that to keep going, you will have thousands of scenes, and it will just be too complex for any single author or any single brain to handle. So, how do we deal with that? We have 2 major methods. First, the hourglass story structure, and second, delayed branching through the use of numerical stats. The first one is a narrative structure, and the second one is where I'm going to start getting into some nitty-gritty of the code. So first, the hourglass structure. This is a diagram that I showed you earlier, right at the beginning. This is one way to manage choice. So you can see you have your starting point, and then you have a few options of where to go next. Each of those has a few options, but then you don't add any more. You pull them all back together to another single point. And then you let it branch out again, and then it comes back. So this is how you prevent that ever outward branching. You make sure that you have some kind of narrative unity to your game by pulling the story back to a unified point. So here's an example of how that works. This is from A Player's Heart by Melissa Scott. This is the RFF title, and the PC is works for an all-woman opera company. And you don't have to read every word on the page, but this is just to show you. At the beginning of the game, the player chooses what kind of specialty their character has in the opera company. They can be an actor who specializes in one kind of role, they can be an actor who specializes in another kind of role, or they can be on the stage crew. And depending on which of those 3 roles they have chosen, opening night will go very differently. In these 3 colored boxes, these are three entirely different versions of the same scene. There are three totally different paths through the same event of opening night. So that's the story branching out. But then, no matter how they have spent opening night, no matter what they've done on stage or backstage, it always comes back to the same encounter at the after party. There's one path through the after party, and there they always meet the wealthy patron who is one of the ROs. So the action branches out and then comes back in. And so this means that we have to think pretty intensely about narrative structure, about how we are going to proceed through the story, and what kinds of narrative events can pull the action back into unity. And this means that we have to outline pretty hard. Now, with romance novelists in particular, romance novelists have a big advantage here in that we're used to thinking structurally already. Romance has a lot of really well-established narrative design beats. You know, you have the meet cute, the first kiss, the dark moment, etc. We're used to thinking about narrative in a structural way. So that's one advantage that a romance novelist will have coming into writing this kind of narrative. Now, then there's the how do you actually approach writing? There's the plotters versus the pantsers. And I will have to say, you have to outline pretty heavily if you're going to have any chance of making it through writing a branching narrative. So if you're a plotter already, awesome, you've got an advantage. If you are a pantser, this might be your chance to start doing outlines. And at the bottom, I've got a link to an article written by one of our Choice of Games authors, Max Gladstone, who just won a Nebula. We're very proud of him, about his transition from being a pantser to being a plotter, interactive fiction, and how I learned to stop grumbling, and for God's sake, outline once in a while. So, the hourglass structure is one, and heavy outlining and heavy structural plotting is one way that we help keep our branching narratives in check. Another technique we use is called delayed branching. And in this part of the talk, I'm going to show you some of what choice script looks like, because that's really the most effective way to show you how delayed branching works. So the basic idea, remember back when I was talking about dating sims and the love meter. So we have lots of meters running behind the scenes. And so that's how we use delayed branching. I'm going to show you how that works. So here is a little snippet from my work in progress. Love Super. So you, the PC, are Lightspeed, a speedster hero with a day job as a reporter. And here you are fighting off a supervillain called Rusty, who has rust powers. And one of the ROs has just shown up. That is Titanium. He has super strength. He's totally not Superman. He's totally not Captain America, except he totally is. So he's just shown up to help you out. But being polite Captain America, he asks, do you want backup? And you have some options for how to respond to him. Definitely, I like working in a team. No thanks, I don't need help from anyone. No thanks, I'd rather show off for him. So, your answer causes a small difference in what happens next. A few different paragraphs. So it's an example of one of those small branches that's like mini hourglass. You know, if you say you want his help because you like working in a team, great. You have some cool moments of teamwork. He admires your work. If you want to show off for him, you can, and he will admire you. But what matters more is how the game remembers the conversation. And here we start to see a whole bunch of meters ticking behind the scenes. Here's a snippet of code, and I've taken out the extra dialogue and description so that you can see more clearly what's happening in the code. So all of those meters are called numerical stats. They're numbers that are running counters behind the scenes in the code. And how we treat those is that whatever the PC decides to do or say, that says something about what kind of person they are. So the game remembers that, so it can call back to it later on. So if you say that you like working in a team, great. That means you're more likely to be connected to other people. You're less intimidating. If you don't need help from anyone, okay, well, that means you're probably better at blending into a crowd. If you'd rather show off, then you are less good at blending into a crowd. So each game has a unique set of numerical stats customized to what is important to measure in that game. Personality traits, relationships with other characters. You do have love meters, even though they work a little differently. You can also have friendship meters, and even environmental traits like, other plot things that the PC can affect through their actions. So because there are dozens, if not hundreds, of choices throughout the game, each one cannot branch the story, but it causes a small adjustment to one of these numerical stats, so the game remembers. So it's the results of the player's choices are still recorded. One side note. So see the little weird bit with the $sign and the curly brackets near the end? That's another stray bit of code that I meant to cut out for this example, but I left in so you can see some more code. And remember how I said that some of our games have custom gender options. So Love Super is one of them. You can choose the player's gender, you can choose the RO's gender, and this is how the code deals with that. When you choose the gender of a character, the code has, the code swaps out what name and pronouns you should use for that character. And so that's Titanium's gender pronoun code, and you can see his secret identity. His real name is Theo. If Titanium is a woman, her real name is Thea. So there you go. So back to delayed branching. So each of these options, in addition to giving a few customized paragraphs of text, says something about what the character's personality is like and records that difference. Because now the game knows more about what you are, or what you are like. And so here's how delayed branching calls on that. So in the next chapter, the PC is back at work at the Acme City Times, the newspaper, where they're a reporter. And something happens that threatens to expose the PC's secret identity as the superhero Lightspeed. The other reporters are talking about current events in the city, and Rowan, a photographer, brings up the fact that Lightspeed and Titanium thwarted that crime in progress, the scene we just saw. So, can the PC react in a way that doesn't make everyone suspicious and that can help cover up their secret identity? So here are some options, just as we've seen in the other examples. So I'll try to be low key because I don't want anyone to figure out the connection. I'll try to draw people's attention away by talking about something else work-related. Or, I wish I could accept that praise. I'll try to emphasize Lightspeed's role over Titanium's. So, whether the PC can succeed at doing any of these things depends on their stats. So here's a whole bunch of code. Again, I've highlighted the really important parts so you can see what's going on. So you remember how that previous choice affected the blending stat. So that's what's getting measured here. Again, so it didn't create a huge difference in the story before, but now we're calling back to the cumulative effect of all of those choices that affected blending to create a real difference in the story. So if you try to be low-key, the game asks, how good is this character at blending really? If you are good, then great, that's enough, and everybody pays attention to Rowan instead of you, and you're fine. If it's not enough, if you're not that good at blending, then your other colleague says, hey, weren't you there last week? don't you know a lot about that neighborhood? And now everybody's looking at you, and people start to get suspicious. Or if you want to draw people's attention away by talking about something else, then yeah, you try to do that. If you're really bad at blending in, if you're good at standing out, then you succeed at that. And your boss, Ms. Lopez, remembers that you did that great article last month. And she's now focused on your performance as a good reporter, and nobody's trying to figure out why you know so much about it. Nobody's paying attention to light speed. The other important thing to note about this is that each of these tests has a failure condition as well. Going back to the dating sims with their sort of gamified things, remember, if your meter isn't high enough, you fail at what you were trying to do. So that's possible in these tests of numerical stats for Heart's Choice. And that success versus failure produces bigger differences in the story. So that's how we make choices matter in the long run without making infinite branches. Numerical stats allow us to record the spirit of the player's choices without recording each individual action. And then we measure the cumulative effect of those choices in order to produce meaningful differences later on when we do want a big branch. So, to sum up, we write interactive fiction through branching narrative with an hourglass structure. We use delayed branching to have earlier choices affect future events, and the chance of a failure raises the stakes. Your success is more meaningful if you could have possibly failed. You are overcoming a real obstacle. Delayed branching also creates a dynamic narrative because it shows how the player's choices matter. Sorry, just gonna do time check. What time is it? Okay, cool. I definitely have time for what I'm doing. All right, so now let's move on to how we apply those techniques to interactive romance specifically. And what we do in Heart's Choice, we definitely want to make the player's choices continue to matter. But we also need to keep the promise of the happily ever after. And we call on the advantages that having lots of choices can give us, and that all of that delayed branching and numerical stats, all of that customization to create immersion through a lot of choice. And this is cover art from another one of our games, All World Pro Wrestling, which is a wrestling game. So, first, keeping the promise of the happily ever after. This is the one place where we break the rules I've just established. In our usual game design, we want the player's choices to matter. I've just talked about how important it is to have real stakes in a test, which means a chance of failure. But we want to give our readers a lot of the experience of reading a romance novel, and that means keeping the promise of the happily ever after. So that is the one thing for which we have a predetermined outcome. There is no chance of failure. You choose, you do get choice. We honor your choice in that we give you a choice of potential lovers. But when you choose that, you are guaranteed that happily ever after. You will end up with that person. And here's an example of that exact choice from A Pirate's Pleasure. This is near the end. You've gotten to know all of these men, and you are finally choosing, okay, this is the man I want. Or if you decide you don't want any of them, that's cool too. We respect that. But you choose that person, and you will get your happily ever after with them. Every other plot, though, has the potential for success or failure. You can totally lose everything else. Here is one of the potential endings from Pirate's Pleasure. You can lose your crew. You can lose your treasure. The governor exiles you. You get banished. But darn it, you've chosen to be with Caleb, you are with him, and he is with you in exile, and he sticks with you, and you get at least that little bit of happiness, even if you lose everything else. So we also make the player's choices matter by offering immersion through customization. And I mentioned this before, we try to offer as many options as possible for the PC's appearance, personality, etc. So here is a choice from the beginning of Pirate's Pleasure. This is where you are choosing what you look like. And this is just one choice of many. This is about hair. You can have long, thick hair. You can have short, choppy, messed up hair. You can have highly stylized hair, perfectly coiffed. You can be bald. You can have your hair tucked away under a headscarf. And there are other pages of choices where you get to choose what color your hair is, what skin tone, what eye color, what build you have. So you can make yourself look like yourself in real life. You can build a different person. But this is one way of offering the chance to get physically closer to your character by building a person who looks like you. You also build a character who can be emotionally like you or emotionally different. We offer those, in all of those choices along the way, we offer a range of reactions. So here's a choice from Jazz Age. A handsome stranger has just been flirting with the PC. And there are several different ways that you can react to this. I'm sure he was only being friendly. Of course he was flirting with me. I'm a great catch. Who cares? I'm a realist. I'll probably never see him again. And so those three reactions are the reactions of different kinds of people. And so we want to allow the player to immerse themselves in the story by offering a range of emotional reactions, so that whatever they themselves would feel at that moment, or the character that they're building would feel at that moment, there's an option for them to express themselves that way. And this is one of the things that can be tricky for people coming from novels. You know, one of the things that we work hard on when we're writing a novel is to get inside the main character's head. You know, what do they want? They want something, and that single motivation drives the story forward. It's harder when you're writing interactive fiction to create the space for several potential motivations. And you can't tell the player what they want because they want to be able to inscribe that upon the main character. And so one very important subset of customization is letting the player choose their emotions in romantic moments and others. So, instead of narrating, you feel your anger rise, or you back away terrified, you offer a range of potential emotions and let the player choose which one you feel. And that's especially important when you have romantic scenes. We never want the player to approach a scene and say, no, but I don't actually feel that way. We want there to be enough options so that they can express how they feel. So here's an example of how this plays out in a romantic context. This is another scene from Player's Heart. This is our FF title. The PC is having sword fighting practice with one of their fellow actors, and things are starting to get sexy. So do you want to flirt through sword fighting, or are you not interested in her? So you have several options. This is glorious, I want more. I like this, and I want to take it at least a little further. I don't like this, and I don't want to play this game with Celine. I will deliberately break the spell. Or, I'm not sure what I want, but I'm going to shut this down. So there's a range of emotional reactions to realizing that someone is flirting with you. And the game honors that. If you want to stop, then you get the narration of the emotions that go along with it. So the choice just says what you feel. Then the narration follows to say, to give all of that in-depth description of feeling that emotion after you've already declared that you feel it. So if you declared, I don't like this, then you say, then the text responds by saying, yes, that's what you feel. The tension is too much. You want to break away. If you choose the option that says, yes, I want it to continue, then the text confirms that and goes into that deep interiority of exploring how you feel, how you want the sword fight to continue, how you feel when you clasp hands at the very end, and then break away. So this is also important when you are describing the potential lovers. Ran out of time, there's no picture in here, but picture sexy pirate. This is another one from Pirate's Pleasure. One of the things that we have to work really hard on doing is describing characters as attractive without describing that the PC is attracted to them, because we want to honor that choice. We want to let the player express that they are attracted before we start describing that the PC is attracted to this character. We don't want to say that they are attracted if the player doesn't want to be. So we have to describe the ROs in attractive ways. As you see here, sexy pirate description. And if the player then chooses the option to say, yes, I think I am attracted to this person, then the text will respond accordingly. But as we saw in the previous scene, if the player chooses the option that says, no, not for me, okay, not for you, moving on. That's why we have multiple romance options. So those are some of the narrative and structural and mechanical techniques that we use to craft interactive romance for Heart's Choice. So now, what do you want to do if you want to make your own? If you heard everything that I just said and thought, that is cool. So, the first thing that you should do is play a lot of them. There's a lot of different genres out there, as I've just said, so play a wide range. Some of them may be more fun for you than others are. Some of the styles may be better suited to your personal writing style than others. So play a lot of games first to get a sense of what each one is like, and what each company is like, and what each game style is like. Try to play each game at least twice, and try to make different choices each time. Doing that will show you some of the branching. If making different choices will give you a really dramatically different experience on your second playthrough, then that tells you that that particular game or that particular company has a lot of branching in their narrative. If the experience is fairly similar, no matter what choice you make, that tells you that the branching structure is fairly simple. None of these are better or worse inherently than any others, they're just different. And if you're going to try your hand at making your own, you should get a sense of which style suits you best. Next step is to look at the code that you're going to be working with, because in almost all cases you will be doing the writing and the programming yourself. Now the good thing is that there are a lot of tools out there that are meant for people with very little coding experience. All of these companies know that people are coming to them with a lot of prose writing experience, but not necessarily a lot of coding experience. So if you find a company whose style you feel that you fit well with and that you think you want to go more in more depth, take a look at their code. Episode, chapters, choices, they all have their own proprietary code. ChoiceScript is the language that we use for Heart's Choice. There's a link to that here. If you want visual novels, RenPy is the main language for writing that. And another really common language is Twine. And that's a super, super simple one. If you have no coding experience at all, I would recommend starting with Twine. That's the best tool for coding branching narratives for your very, very first try. All of the ones I've listed here are free and open source, so don't have to pay anything. So your next step after you've found a tool that works for you is think about, as you would with a print novel, do you want to contract with a publisher? Do you want to go indie? For some of these tools, you can publish on your own, or you will have to go through the company, and each one varies. So if you decide to contract with a publisher, ask the same kinds of questions of that publisher that you would of a print publisher. How do they pay you? They should pay you. Is it a flat fee? Is it an advance against royalties? Is it royalties with no advance? Things like that. A good company will be transparent about how much you'll get paid and how you'll get paid. If you've got an agent, I will say, I don't know how that works with other companies. That's pretty internal stuff. I will say at Heart's Choice, we are totally fine with working with agents. We have worked with both agented and unagented authors. My instinct is that other companies are also cool with unagented authors, but again, that would be a question to ask your contact once you actually start the process. And if you want to go indie and publish your own digital romance, that is totally possible too. And again, that's why I've listed these open source codes. These are free. Anybody can use them. For ChoiceScript, we have kind of an asterisk. If you want to publish your game for free in ChoiceScript, anybody can do that. If you want to sell it, if you want to do the indie publishing equivalent with ChoiceScript and sell your game, you have to go through our indie label, which is Hosted Games. And finally, if you want to write for us, we are super happy to get applications from experienced romance novelists. So the logistics for writing for us are different from a regular publishing company. You don't come to us with a finished manuscript. Instead, you send us a sample of your prose writing. And then we work with you to come up with a concept, a pitch, and a design doc, and we teach you ChoiceScript. Because we have such specific requirements for our stories, and because authors need to learn ChoiceScript along the way, we build games from scratch, working closely with the author. If you are super comfortable working with code and want to work totally on your own, that's cool. Hosted Games could be the route for you. There you just write the game on your own, submit it, and we sell it for you. On these pages, you will see more specifics about logistics, about royalties, contracts, etc. This is our FAQ. I'm happy to answer questions, of course, but you will find a lot of that information there as well. And so that brings us to the end. I will be sending all of that information to Don so that you can have that information available, or you can, I'll leave it up right now for a little while so you can take a screenshot, write it down, whatever, if you would like this information. But that is the end of my part of the presentation, and now is time for questions if you have them.
Well, what I'd like to do is actually, could you take it down? Because I've taped this and this will be available to people, but I want to be able to see the chat. If anybody has any questions, if they could put them in the chat, I can pose them so we're not all asking at once. But I have some questions to start. Are there any classes that people can take that teach them this? Anybody offering any classes, either or courses anywhere?
Not that I know of, but there are a lot of online communities for each of these formats. For ChoiceScript, we have the ChoiceScript forum. There's a really active community of Twine users, so there are a few tutorials out there, but no formal like sit down classes as far as I know. There are a few online tutorials, and every one of these tools has an active community and forum of users, so people can post questions, get help, get answers.
Perfect. And when somebody's intending to start writing for you or for another company, is there a number of words they end up aiming for, or they should be counting on writing?
That is a super good question. For Heart's Choice, our minimum for a game is 60,000 words for a game. But we have had people go as high as over 200,000.
Wow. Okay.
And I want to actually caution that. So because of the branching nature of the narrative, you won't see every single one of those words on a single playthrough. Every playthrough sees about between 15% and 25% of the total words.
Mm-hmm.
So on a single playthrough of a 60,000 word game, you may only see, math, like 10,000 to 15,000 words.
Understood. And also, is there any software programs that people can get that prompt them, like, here's your narrative and here's where you'll stick in some choices and they do the coding for you?
Okay, so I believe for Twine there is. The tools that Episode uses has some of that. For ChoiceScript, there is a tool called Seaside, CSIDE, and that stands for ChoiceScript Interactive Development Environment. And Seaside does a little of that. That's sort of like training wheels for ChoiceScript. But I have to caution for Seaside, that is a user-developed tool that's not officially supported by Choice of Games. And we have to caution that because, like, if Seaside breaks, we can't do anything to fix it. So, it'd have to be up to the user, and, for him, it's a labor of love. So he may not always be able to fix things really quickly. But yeah, some of those tools do exist.
But what you were saying before, say somebody queried you and they, you end up working with them, you'll end up doing the coding for them and they'll supply the writing, so that's sort of like a collaborative effort?
No, they do the coding themselves. Because the branching narrative and because all of the stats are so deeply intertwined with the narrative, the author does the writing and the coding themselves.
Okay, that's going to kind of limit you to some of the younger writers. I'm just talking for myself, because when you start talking about coding, I zoom out.
Yeah. Oh no. We absolutely understand that, and and that's why I recommend to some people, try starting with Twine, because that's a simpler, more pared down kind of thing, and then you can move from that to ChoiceScript. We understand, like, ChoiceScript is not the simplest thing out there, and we do understand that is going to be a limiting factor for some people. I'm
getting some questions that are actually duplicating some of my questions, which is nice.
Great.
So are there multi-user platforms, or is that when you start going to things like Second Life?
No, they're not so for ChoiceScript, I can definitely say not yet. We are in the process of developing it. I'm actually one of the other projects that I was doing that's currently on hold is our first multiplayer game. And it's going to be so cool, and I really hope we can get it done. Everything else is single player only.
Okay. What can a writer expect to earn in this field? A huge range, I'm sure.
Definitely a huge range, I am sure. Episode and choices are not very transparent about what you can earn. So I will say right up front, I'm a little skeptical of them because of that. I will say for Heart's Choice, we pay a $5,000 advance against 25% royalties. Because we've only been published in publication for 6 months, unfortunately, I can't give you any firm numbers on, royalties or earning over time. From choice of games, I can say that I would say we also do 25% royalties. A middle of the road game earns about, let's see, earns 25 to 30,000 total, of which 25% goes to the author.
Okay. So
Yeah.
you're about 6,000 or 7,000?
Yes.
Okay. And are these games set up the same way as the average war game? And how did you get involved in doing this? So two-part question.
What do you mean set up in the same way as the average war game?
Not my question. So if anybody wants to chime in who asked that, I don't know who asked that.
I asked it, and it probably doesn't make any difference if you answer it because I never even played one of those games. I just,
Okay.
like I'm guessing that war games, like if you shoot this person, that sends you some other place, or are they just totally? I have no idea.
Yeah, totally different. War games are, primarily visual. They will have some sort of similar things going on with, health meters and relationship meters sometimes, but yeah, war games are super different.
Okay.
Who assigns the numerical meters, blending, etc.?
The author does. That's part of what the author does. Is the author decides, with our support and help, what stats to give to a certain game. The author and the editor together decide what things are important to measure in that game. And the author decides which actions affect each of the stats.
And the second part of Elf's question was, how did you get involved in doing all of this?
Okay. So the very short answer is the Choice of Games was founded by two of my college friends, and they needed a new editor at the same time that I needed a new job. The longer answer is that I have been playing role-playing games since I was in high school, like D&D and that kind of stuff, and live action role playing. And so role-playing games are, one step away from this. And I always, when I read the old Choose Your Own Adventure books as a kid, I sort of approached them as a role-playing game, as a way for you to experience a story. And so when my friends started this company back in 2009, I was a fan. I played their games. I thought they were very cool. So I was sort of building up this experience without knowing it. And then when they needed a new editor and I was unemployed, all of the threads sort of converged.
Right. So another question is, how erotic do these games get? How far do they go?
There is a very wide range. Within Heart's Choice, we have a chili pepper system for how hot a game is. We go from 1 chili pepper, which is some smoochin' and maybe like some soft focus, to 3 chili peppers, which is super spicy. We are allowed to get away with some more, with a higher level of erotic content than a lot of other games are because we are text only. The limiting factor for digital games is often Apple. Apple is really, really strict about sexual content. We've actually had one of our hosted games flagged because the cover art had someone with a slightly too low cut top. And we had to change the art. But they're fine with anything that is non-visual. So in Heart's Choice, some of our games can get pretty spicy. But the level of spice content is totally up to the author. So just as in, regular novels, you choose, and we will just rate accordingly so that readers can go towards the kind of content that they want and away from the kind of content that they don't.
And so if somebody wanted to break in,
Yes.
Where would they find a list of people to query, and how would they go around about the querying process?
So for Heart's Choice and hosted games, they should follow the links there. And that would send you to our information pages, and that will tell you about the querying process, what we look for, the logistics of that. For visual novels and dating sims, there isn't a sort of centralized company for that. So I'm less clear on how those work. For chapter, episode, and choices, episode and choices definitely contract with outside authors, and each of those companies has their own information page outlining their process about querying, writing, etc.
So what would you Google? Would you just Google interactive games, or?
Go by the company themselves. I believe I put the link. Episode, I think, is episodeinteractive.com. Choices is run through Pixelberry Studio. I'm going to type that into the chat. So Google Pixelberry. Yeah. And Choices is unfortunately similar to Choice of Games. So every so often our poor tech support person gets somebody irate because of something that happened, their game broke and it's not actually one of ours, it's one of Choices.
Okay.
So yeah.
So I have another question. I have two more questions so far. What are the most popular genres today?
Okay, cool. Popular genres. I would say the YA high school type genre. High school college is really popular across all of these platforms. And also, as I mentioned before, paranormal is really popular. Vampires and werewolves, real big.
Perfect. Now someone, and I can't see who it was, said, Dawn, I have a question for Rebecca. So whoever that is, do you want to chime in?
It was me, Dawn. I thought you could see my name, sorry. So Rebecca, I have a question. You were talking about, first of all, thank you. Wow, I couldn't write fast enough. What a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
In the beginning, you had mentioned about different types of interactive romance, and one of them was the choices, episodes, chapters, and I think that was the one where you said that the player can get more if they pay.
Yeah.
Who determines that? Is it with the author? How is that decided upon?
I don't know. That is something internal to them. So unfortunately, I don't know how those decisions get made.
But within Heart's Choice, you have some such games, or you do not?
In Heart's Choice, we do not.
Okay.
That is, sorry, I absolutely should have mentioned that. Thank you for the opportunity to clarify. We do not pay for premium choices.
Okay.
Yeah, most of our games, in fact, most of our games are free. You pay to turn off ads. So that's how we get our revenue from Heart's Choice.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for that.
Does anybody else have any questions? Because I'm gone to the bottom of my list and I don't see anything else in the group chat. Here's one. Are some of these games available via phone app?
Yes, thank you for that. So just about everything. All right, so Heart's Choice, definitely on phone. We are available on all mobile platforms, on iOS, Google Play. We are also available on Steam if you prefer to play on desktop. Chapters, episodes, choices, I believe are mobile only. Dating sims and visual novels, most of those are desktop only. But again, there's such a wide range. Some of them are available on mobile, but it's really hard to, there's so many I can't say which are which. But Heart's Choice, definitely available on mobile, and that is where we do most of our sales, actually.
Perfect. Any other questions before I let Rebecca go? Counting 1,
No,
2.
I saw a hand. Yes. Hi.
Hi. Okay, I have a question. If we were to submit to you, I was looking at your site as you were chatting. You would
Yes.
want a CV or resume
Yep.
and a writing sample. Like what? Like how much of a sample would you want?
For a writing sample, we would want maybe 3 to 5 pages of something that 3 to 5 pages of prose that shows off your style and that is in the kind of genre that you would want to write for us.
Okay.
Not something. Some advice that we've seen from having gone through thousands of these. Don't give us something like super stylized and experimental. We want to get an example of your average voice. And again, something in the kind of genre that you would want to write for us. If you want to write Heart's Choice, definitely give us romance. Somebody sent us like really gory horror. Right, for Heart's Choice. Don't do that. If you want to write romance, show us how well you can write romance. Give us something that shows you at your best.
What's going on? Do you have people who are sending you, or do you have an interest in time travel romance?
Bring it on. We don't have it yet. Time travel is real tricky to manage continuity, but we can do it.
Anybody else? Once, twice. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. It's been super informative. It was something I think none of us knew anything about before.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. You have my email address if you have questions that occur to you afterwards, or if you're interested in querying, please drop me a line. I'm happy to talk more. Thank you so much, Dawn, for inviting me. This was a lot of fun.
And just so everybody knows, this has been taped and it will be on our chapter website. So if anybody wants to review or get any of the information that was on the slides, it's available for you.
Great.
Thank you again.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Bye-bye.
And I'll see you all next month.
Bye.
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 Hi, Dawn.